Hi, welcome to the CII AWP Community Business Advancement Update webinar. I'm Eric Crivella. We have Jamie Gerbrecht and we have Mike Pappas here. And today we want to give you a quick overview, introductions. We'll do some introductions. I'll give a quick safety minute. Mike will give an overview of the CII research program that we have going on and talk a little bit about the AWP research program. And then I'll dive into some updates in terms of the CII AWP CBA overview and provide the updates as to what we have going on in the community of business advancement. And we'll leave some time at the end for some QA and do a meeting wrap up from there. So if Mike is available, if you and Jamie, if you guys want to introduce yourselves, go ahead, and then we'll dive into a safety minute there.
Yeah, so Jamie Gerbrecht, 38 years with ExxonMobil and working with Eric in the vice chair role with the AWP CBA since 2017. Welcome.
Thanks, Jamie.
Hi, I'm Mike Pappas. I'm CII's Associate Director for Deployment. Been with CII for 3.5 years now.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Mike. All right, in terms of, I'm Eric Crivella. I work for Digital Construction Works. I've been in the industry for 24 years or so. Digital Construction Works is a digital integrator, digital accelerator. 50% Bentley, 50% Topcon. Within CII, I sit on the Strategic Planning Committee, and I'm the chair along with Jamie and Bill O'Brien in terms of on the co-chair for the AWP Community of Business Advancement, and been a part of the CBA since its inception, 2015-ish. So for several years, been a part of that, and yeah, excited to give you guys an overview here. So on a safety topic here, McKinsey had some articles that they put out, and they're really, how can construction emerge stronger after COVID, after this coronavirus, right? So it's been kind of a mixed blessing here. It's, COVID's horrible, but it's really forcing the issue of going digital, right? So it's really forcing the use of construction technology going forward, and the trends are heading in that direction in terms of more owners and contractors adopting technologies that allow them to go digital, allow them to work virtually, right? And so, in the short term, an increased level of digitization, right, as coming out of as part of COVID. So the increased use of building information modeling, 4D, 5D, integrated digital twins, right, and contractors looking to be able to monitor their employees' well-being, as well as the dashboarding for their projects to really have a good sense of where the project's at and greater visibility over it. One of the real cool, interesting construction technologies that's come about and been advanced via COVID has been artificial intelligence and the use of video for safety and doing safety analysis. So being able to take video and being able to ensure that looking at, okay, where are we at in terms of social distancing from a PPE perspective, right? Being able to, do they have on the right mask? Do they have a mask on at all? Are they social distance? Being able to detect where people are at on site, and or setting up the employee management platform in which you're checking people in and using thermal cameras. So, technology has really come a long way, but COVID has forced the issue, and really there's a number of companies that are now taking advantage of artificial intelligence and created safety related solutions for monitoring work sites, as well as using it to monitor the COVID situation. So kind of really interesting there. One of the another kind of technology play that's really becoming more front and center during COVID times is the use of industrial safe wearables. In this case, looking at a RealWear, a two-way camera and a head-mounted display. So the display has a 7-inch tablet, projects like a 7-inch tablet, and gives you an update in terms of looking at being able to see remotely and a two-way camera, so you can do more with less. You can have one person go on site and be backed up by a subject matter experts in the home office or distributed virtually in order to support tasks out in the field. So the use of this sort of technology seems to have grown and is becoming more front center in terms of doing things virtually and supporting online interactive planning sessions, as well as field-based progressing and inspections. This has been an area in which my company's kind of jumped in and gotten involved with as well. So really interesting movements in terms of going digital because of COVID. So as a safety moment, that's the topic for this one. Mike, I'm gonna hand it over to you for a bit here and kind of allow you to talk through a little bit where CII is at with the research plans.
All right, thanks, Eric. If you please go to the next, there you go. Here's a look at our current research program looking ahead for the next 3 years or so. In dark green, you see the AWP research projects that will report out at the Research Summit on September 1st and 2nd. But you see the research that we have, the dark colors are ongoing, or the dark bars. The light bars are what's planned. Go to the next slide, please. Here's a look at the research program for AWP. The first 2 studies on the left form the foundation of AWP. The next 3 in the middle looked at different aspects of the process and addressed specific problems that we saw as practitioners are implementing AWP. Said, hey, these 3 areas in particular need more definition. So those 3 research teams just finished, and then the digital threads team just finished as well, and that is what's going to provide the bridge to, you know, what we might call next generation AWP, but eventually adding automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning to help support AWP. The next slide, please. We have our very first virtual research summit on September 1st and 2nd. This partially replaces our annual conference this summer. Registration is available on the events page of our website, www.construction-institute.org, and CII member pricing is available when you register. It'll ask if you're a CII member. So that's a summary of the CII research program as it stands today.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. We're all looking forward to this AWP Research Virtual Summit coming up September 1st and 2nd. Now I'd like to give you guys an update in terms of what we have going on and what the AWP Community of Business Advancement is all about. And you know, at a high level, you know, we're all about promoting and scaling advanced work packaging. How do we get to a measurable reduction in construction cost and schedule via the programmatic adoption of advanced work packaging? You know, the training and the education, the engineering, aligning with engineering, doing the contracts, the data management, integration and automation, and measuring, right? So it's no longer just, you know, hey, we did this, we have to prove how much we moved the needle. So at a high level, the priorities that we set up for the CBA in 2020, coming looking at it from a, okay, let's grow the membership, but you know, let's focus on deliverables that can add to CII's AWP thought leadership, right? And so education is truly a leading indicator of success. So, you know, how do we rally around a set of common definitions, an educational framework, and put in place what we want in terms of a certification process? So that's evolving as we speak, right? And it's all about the data. So what can we do to promote AWP data requirements and evolve the AWP digital threads initiatives to connect the dots at the data level, right? And so, and then we're always interested in promoting greater buy-in from our colleagues in engineering and procurement. And then, as I mentioned a little bit before, measurement. It's not just we said we did AWP. Let's actually do it, and let's start measuring and developing a common set of metrics to work from. So when we communicate the results, we're all speaking the same language. And lastly, how do we use the CBA to become the go-to resource? How do we get this so there's a repository, a concierge service, a framework that can be used where everybody can go and come up to speed on AWP. So we have monthly meetings, the first Wednesday of every month from 8 to 9:30 Central, we have a meeting, right? So CIM members, if you want to join, would welcome you. Get in touch with Bob Weeble. We also have a leadership meeting every other Friday. So we have a group of about 10 folks that get on the phone and help determine what the next steps are and give updates in terms of where we're at on the subcommittees and priorities going forward. And then on top of that, there's subcommittee meetings that occur on a monthly basis in which these folks are working on the various deliverables and updates. Then we have various workshops and events that we sponsor throughout the year as well. So just a quick flavor in terms of some of the monthly meeting topics that we've had this year. January, defining the priorities, February, the deliverables. March, we had a presentation on scaffolding in AWP and augmented reality. April, we had a data requirements meeting. May, we had smart contracts in AWP. We had our friends at Data Gumbo give a presentation on that. June, we had a joint meeting with the Safety CBA in which we had DTech Technologies make a presentation on their AI for safety capabilities and drones and cameras, and what I showed in the safety minute there. In July, we had a really good meeting with engineering for AWP with a wonderful presentation from John Fish from Ford Bacon Davis. And just earlier this month, we had a meeting, kind of a discussion type of meeting in which Advanced Project Delivery initiating a discussion about looking at the different project execution methodologies. So Lean, BIM, Integrated Project Delivery, Agile, Production Management, and rationalizing these in relation to advanced work packaging and kind of starting that discussion and kicking off a joint working group along those lines to be inclusive and to try to understand how we can play with AWP plays with BIM, Lean, and these other execution methodologies that are perhaps, depending on your segment, are more prevalent than a discussion related to AWP. So how do we have communication with our friends in the BIM world and the civil infrastructure side of it, and buildings and vertical outside of just the industrial segment? So really good discussion and kicking off that group. Our metrics for the year, I won't go through all these, but some of these have been hampered by our COVID in terms of the face-to-face meetings. We delayed the ROI calculator. We've kind of changed that initiative more towards a value scenario framework that we're working on, and I'll show you that. And of course, our outreach events were kind of put, at least the face-to-face ones, were certainly put on hold a little bit in terms of COVID. But we're making great progress within the CBA and growing, and it's a lot of good energy. In terms of research topics, we just had a research workshop that recently that I'll go a little bit more into detail, and we'll have some things that we're going to share with funded studies in terms of ideas on where we would suggest going with AWP research going forward. A little bit of an overview on how the CBA is set up. So there's 4 subcommittees. There's education and outreach, really focused on a framework for training. right? And getting everybody a go-to resource in terms of understanding AWP. I'll talk more about that. Performance and benchmarking. Our friend Josh Gervin is the chair of this performance and benchmarking subcommittee, looking at the value scenario framework and ROI standardization and metrics. Nicholson is leading the charge here on the knowledge management subcommittee, with really looking at creating an AWP BOC in the concierge service. And then the original AWP research that was done as part of Research Team 272 is getting a refresh, if you will, based off of all the new research that it's about to be reported out coming up in early September. Then we have the AWP Business Accelerator Subcommittee. And this group is working on several things, but one of the more interesting ones is this AWP Capabilities Assessment Matrix, which they're collaborating with the Performance and Benchmarking Subcommittee and really putting together kind of a value scenario tool that allows you to plot out where you're at on your project or where you're at as an organization and where you want to go to, but looking at it from value scenarios and capabilities and functionality. So it allows you to create a crawl, walk, run, multi-generational development plan, implementation plan in terms of looking at where you're at currently and then where you want to get to from a target state. So that's a really interesting tool. I'll show you a little bit on that. And then we're about to kick off a fifth subcommittee with the joint working group, the folks that have been working on the data requirements, and some of the folks that are reporting out from the digital threads will hopefully participate in this one. But we're looking to keep the initiative going in terms of using the same working group that's come up with these data requirements, keep that initiative going in terms of supporting and evolving the AWP digital threads and data requirements going forward. So this one's just now being discussed and chartered and set up. So really good energy put into this. A couple of deliverables and a couple mentions in terms of on the specific deliverables for within the subcommittees. The Education and Outreach Subcommittee has done a wonderful job. This is run by Mandy Coker. And Mandy, there's probably a team of probably 15 folks or more, but have contributed and have put together an AWP educational framework. And this is just now to the point where it's getting looked at and published. But the vision here is really to create a go-to resource, right? So folks can come up to speed on advanced work packaging, right? Kind of set the standard in terms of AWP education and training and where you would want to go in terms of at least the framing where things need to go from an education and getting your client up to speed. So if you want, it's a primer for AWP, but it also establishes kind of the framework going forward from an educational perspective. So really good. So they've made really tremendous progress. This is now in, we're going through, the leadership is actually going through this and scrutinizing it from a final publication perspective. We hope to be able to release this later in a couple weeks from now, or perhaps at the annual conference, the research summit that's coming up September 1st and 2nd. So stay tuned for this. You know, this is something that's really good capabilities. So what's in this? You know, this gives you a really high level overview of what is AWP, what's the benefits, what's the business case, what's the history, what are the deliverables by phase, the roles, expectations, different work pack types, what does interactive planning and the path of construction, constraint management, can AWP be scaled to smaller projects? And then, you know, a really interesting section on overcoming common AWP objections. So just a really good primer educational framework to bring people up to speed on AWP. So I think this is going to be a really useful capabilities and document to share out going forward. A performance and benchmarking group is really, updating where the value scenario framework, which I'll show you next in terms of this AWP capabilities assessment tool set that we use there, in order to really figure out where the value is being generated, and is it AWP or is it coming from elsewhere? But really defining kind of the value scenarios and how to group these value scenarios. And along those lines, the AWP capabilities assessment and the value framework that's described, that I just described there, is looking at these 15 value scenarios, and it's a tool along these lines. So if I want to release the constraint-free work packages out in the field, it has a description as to what that is. Here's the benefits of that. Here's where the savings would come from. So if I prioritize that, I can start using this as this spreadsheet tool in order to kind of gauge where I'm at on the project and align my value scenarios with various capabilities and touch points, right? So get down to the point of looking at, okay, so in order, if my goal is to issue constraint-free work packages out there, I can kind of evaluate each one of the path of construction and the details as to what that means, what's involved with defining and documenting the path of construction, what all that means, and start looking at that from a target state. Here's where my current state is, and then here's a target state, and aligning that with the functionalities that I need to achieve in order to recognize that value scenario. So it gives you kind of a tool in which to plot out your priorities and your level of maturity, where you're at now, where you want to go, what are the priorities, what are the different ways, or what all do I need to accomplish in terms of digital workflows to really define those values, and then align them with exactly where you want to go. So connecting the dots there, really, really good tool, and tying this in with the data requirements is a really good initiative along these lines. So at some point, if you want to see a demo of this or get a workshop, we're setting up various workshops within the CBA to promote this and to use this tool going forward as a self-assessment tool and a tool in which to you can gauge where you're at currently and set your path forward for kind of a multi-generational plan, a crawl, walk, run in terms of implementing AWP digital workflows. On the data requirements, this group has done an amazing job since last time this year. In August of last year, when we were in San Diego, we had our friends at Shell had stood up and said, hey, this stuff with the AWP capabilities assessment's wonderful, but we really need to get good data requirements out there and into our supply chain. At our face-to-face meeting last year in San Diego. So that kicked off an initiative in which the AWP Data Requirements was set in motion. And so this was a project from a joint working group was formed, and a small tight group of people, really technical people, put together this wonderful data requirements tool set, as well as a guide. And this guide is now, to the point where CII is reviewing it, and it's going to be put out to be published. But this is what connects the dots in terms of at a data level and driving AWP onto our projects by having the right data requirements. So we took the original 272 flow diagrams and really looked at the data requirements for all the different stages where you're at on the project, but the different for CWPs, EWPs, what do I want? What's my data requirements related to all the schedule activities for piping, for the 3D modeling? So this really kind of caps an initiative that was started years ago at FIATech with the AIM project, with the Advanced Work Packaging Information Management. Myself, Ted Blackman, and Martin Swain from Shell kicked this initiative off years ago, but this kind of caps it and really brings it to to CII in terms of producing these data requirements for AWP and putting something pen on paper and offering a tool along these lines and a guide in order to get this into your contracts, into owners' contracts, into EPCs using this and putting it into their subcontracts and really bidding along these lines, taking advantage of understanding and everybody having a common understanding of what should be included in order to really effectively do and have visibility on your projects from an AWP perspective. Really, really critical enabler going forward. And again, this is going to be a subcommittee going forward. So if this is something that you're interested in, maybe we could get you involved and put your energies into this subcommittee and get involved on that. Most recently, we had a session in which we went and we looked at, okay, what are we doing from our next generation of AWP research? So we, in COVID times, and normally we would get together once a year and do this sort of workshop in person. For the past several years, we've had a lot of good sessions in person. COVID forced the issue of doing it remotely. And we use this Mural digital workspace, a digital kind of collaboration space, if you will, that was recommended from our friends at Autodesk, and it was wonderful, right? So Daniel Oliveira from UT Austin and CII and Josh Gervin from O3 facilitated the session, and it was really two sessions. It was one in the morning and one in the afternoon. But it built upon the research that had been done in earlier years, or our R&D plans from earlier years that you see over here on the right-hand side. But as a high-level goal, we've really been kind of set the AWP program in motion with the goal of eventually getting to using artificial intelligence to drive AWP, to drive project optimization for AWP. Through AWP. So not necessarily all limited to the technology side of it though, right? So there's a number of different initiatives. Some of it is not just AI and orientation. So anyway, we did this Mural workshop, and Josh Gervin really did a compression planning type of session with Daniel and organized it and facilitated along these lines. And it was one of the better sessions I've ever been a part of. It was pretty cool in terms of just the methodology applied to it in order to do bring together remote planning and do a planning session to come up and prioritize in terms of what makes the most sense and where we would go and what we would suggest back to funded studies in terms of where our research priorities lie. So next step here is kind of take this to more folks within the CBA and kind of rationalize this a little bit further. But boy, what a wonderful tool and a process to actually the compression planning and the Mural to get to this. And I thought we had a really productive session that led to really defining breaking it down and getting down to some level of priorities along these lines. So we're going to have our recommendations to go back to the funded studies, as well as initiatives that we carry forward into 2021 in terms of at the CBA that might involve additional joint working groups or collaborating with our friends that are doing the smart modeling and the integrated project delivery, etc. So great initiative. And at a high level, I would encourage people to get involved and to try to reproduce this elsewhere within CII in terms of determining your team's research priorities. The workshop, a lot of people gave feedback that they thought it was better than an in-person workshop because you could do these virtual sticky notes and it just became really easy to share your ideas and then categorize them and then clean it up and then vote. And so it was a really good workshop. Anyway, it was impressive in order to get to use this sort of AWP research, this methodology. So coming up, our next CBA meeting would be normally scheduled for Wednesday, September 2nd, but we have the AWP Research Virtual Summit in which we have all 5 of our industry-led research teams are reporting out, and we'll be giving the update in terms of the data requirements as well. So this is coming up. I strongly advocate for you to get involved and participate in this session. As Mike mentioned, there's a CII discount that can be applied for CII members. So recommend you get involved with this. And then coming up at the end of October, we have the AWP Conference coming up, which is normally was a Houston event, but now it's with COVID, it's a virtual event. And so our friends at Group ASI are putting on this event, and from there, I guess this comes up at the end of October. We're looking forward to doing this as well. And CII will have a part in this as well. And we'll open it up for questions, but as a general statement, if you're interested in getting involved, right, we're seeking to get more folks involved with the community of business advancement, right? Would love to have you participate. And as a general statement, if you've been a part of CII, you get out of it what you put into it, right? And a lot of this boils down to, rationalizing it. It's good for your company, it's good for your projects, and it's good for your career. And you get involved, and I really believe that the synergies that we have as part of the community here, we can move mountains. So we're interested in recruiting and taking advantage of your energies and applying that going forward. So open it up to a Q&A session. And Mike, and Jamie, you want to jump back in here and see where we're at with any questions?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I have a question about your safety moment. Do you know what the approximate cost is of that industrial wearable camera and hard hat?
I believe the RealWear, I believe that's in the 2,500 to 3,300, somewhere in that ballpark, $3,000-ish for the hard hats for the RealWear HDM1. But I guess I'm quoted at this point. I think that's the ballpark. My understanding was somewhere around $3,000.
Okay, somebody just put in here that they use them, and it's $2,800 for the camera.
There you go. I wasn't too far off.
Any other questions? Go ahead and in your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see a line for questions, and you click on that, you can submit it. Max asks, what was the drone company that presented in the June-July meeting?
That was DTech Technologies. And they have since, I believe, I could be wrong, I believe they have joined CII, DTech Technologies.
Indeed, they have, Eric.
Right, so that worked out well. They presented, and now we've roped them in, and they're applying their energies appropriately. So while we're waiting on a couple questions here, I'm gonna take a liberty here and pull up the AWP AWP Capabilities Assessment spreadsheet tool, right? So I just want to quickly show this to you. I showed you a screenshot of it, but looking at various value scenarios. So say my scenario is I want to execute constraint-free work packages out in the field. Okay, there's 14, I think there's now 15 or more value scenarios. But so what does that really mean? So, okay, here's a description of that. Here's the anticipated benefits associated with that. And then I can start, is this a priority for me? What are my priorities? And then where do I think the benefits are going to come? Or, where is this on the indirects? Is it on the directs? What other KPIs and other benefits could we measure as part of this? So I start looking at what my value scenarios are. What are my priorities in terms of where I want to get value out of this? And then I start looking at it in terms of, okay, in order to do constraint-free work packages, what do I need to do to get there? Okay, so part of that would probably involve, okay, the touch points associated with that. Here's the constraint-free, here's the value scenarios along the top here. but then looking at it in terms of, okay, what are the touch points along those lines? So I'm going to need to develop and document my path of construction in order to get the constraint-free work packages. So what does that really mean, right? So being able to look at that in more detail in terms of, okay, here's these 9 touch points related to the path of construction, right? And then I start evaluating myself in terms of, or my organization or my project in terms of, okay, where are we at in terms of the current state of that for each one of those touch points, and what's the target state? And start using a simple coding system in terms of green, hey, we do this on all our projects. Yellow, it's we have to make some moderate changes. Orange, it requires significant development. Red, we got to do some R&D. And then looking at it from a level of maturity, so L1, L2, and then what are the priorities? You know, X1 is a must-have, X2 secondary, etc. So really going through and taking your value scenarios and really associating those with touch points and looking at it in terms of on what I need to do from a capabilities perspective, what functionality and capabilities do I have to put in place in order to recognize that sort of value scenario. So coming up with a crawl, walk, run, and prioritizing what you want to implement. And then lastly, tying that back to functionality, you know, very specifically looking at it from a functionality. So in order to get the constraint-free work packages, the functionality, I'm going to need to load in the engineering data, right? So what's all involved with that, right? What's the detailed functionality? What are possible applications I have to link into? The data exchanges along those lines. And then, you know, really kind of rationalizing your crawl, walk, run in terms of, or assessing where you're currently at. And then, you know, you might not want to do it for every work package type. So, you know, start off with piping and structural and equipment and bring in E&I next, but allow you to do a kind of a workshop along these lines in order to come up with how this would work for your scenario to drive AWP and AWP workflows onto your project. So this is one of the big initiatives within the AWP Business Accelerator Subcommittee, as well as the performance and benchmarking. So really interesting tool along those lines. And,
thanks, Eric. That's a great demonstration of this capability assessment. And, you know, it's a great illustration of what part of the value of being a member of CII and being a member of the CBA can bring.
Excellent. And so if there's not immediate questions, I'm just going to give you a tease of what's in this AWP Education Framework, right? So this is the Education and Outreach Group. Mandy Coker done a really good job with the team and putting this together. Jamie's a part of it, I'm a part of it. We have a number of people, but really, okay, here's the CII, here's what is advanced work packaging, right? And, you know, so being able to have a kind of high level overview of what it is, you know, workflows, etc. Here's here's the overall kind of why do this, you know, what's the business benefits of this, right? And articulating it high level, the modified surfboard slide that some of you have seen in the past. So the backwards planning effort that's involved with it, right? And then the stage gates in terms of how the flow chart related to this, some of the benefits and value, really, you know, articulated the value and the scenarios quite well, right? So great presentation that gives the basics from an AWP primer, if you will, right? The history and then the myths, early projects. So here's the kind of the history related to AWP. And again, this hasn't been fully vetted and you know, put out for publication, but it's a really useful type of exercise, right? So what do I do? Deliverables by various FEL 1, 2, and 3. What I'm doing in terms of what are my deliverables, etc. So really interesting where you're at and what you should be doing, the value proposition, what's the value of AWP in procurement side of it, right? In the commissioning, and then going through the roles, stakeholders, and you know, anyway, very good, interesting not interesting, but very informative, in terms of where we're at, the different types of work packages, a quick summary, a primer on AWP, if you will. So anyway, that's again, a bit of an overview on the education framework that's been put together that we're going to release later and build upon that. So with that, we'll go back to questions. Mike, do we have any further questions in here? Let me.
I'm muted. Sorry, I was muted. Somebody says AWP capability assessment not only shows the value, but the manpower needed for successful implementation. And that helps to validate the budget needed in order to implement AWP.
Yeah, one more time.
The AWP capability assessment not only shows the value of AWP, but it shows the manpower needed for successful implementation, so it can help validate the budget needed in order to implement AWP.
Amen. Yeah, so yeah, what's the level of investment? But it gives you a systematic way to bring on AWP workflows and functionality and capabilities, right? And come up with your crawl, walk, run. What does the multi-generational plan look like for your adoption of AWP? So you can go through the various, mature, right? So it's a journey. So if you ask our friends at Shell, Dow, and Exxon that have really taken on AWP, they'll tell you it's a journey. And pick your platform, build your core team, and start working on those value scenarios and the capabilities and the functionality. And can't do it all on one project, so look at it programmatically. And that's really what the tool enables, is a programmatic adoption of AWP.
Yep. Okay, that's all the questions that we have right now. Thank you very much for joining us today. We trust the webinar was useful to you. Big thank you to Eric and Jamie for presenting today. And a reminder to join. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.